Good morning and welcome to the opening panel for our 2020 iteration of the Hispanic Latinx Research and Creativity Symposium. I'm Kent Wilkinson, Director of the Harris Institute for Hispanic and International Communication in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech. And the Harris Institute launched this symposium 5 years ago, basically in anticipation of the university attaining Hispanic Serving Institution status. The idea was to bring together folks who are doing similar work related to Hispanic and Latinx issues and populations in the United States. And we were very fortunate to qualify for that Hispanic Serving Institution status in fall of 2017, and then we got the official designation a year ago. So we're continuing this tradition of bringing people together in a very different way this year than we've done before, but thank you all so much. It looks like we've got a strong list of participants. We really appreciate that. And I do want to point out before we go any further, I saw that Joby Martinez is joining us, and I need to give her a shout out in the sense that she worked very closely with me to organize, conceptualize, and organize the first couple of these when she was in our graduate program and our PhD program. I really appreciate that, and it's good to see you here with us, Joby. Before moving on to introduce the panel, there are a few other people that I should acknowledge. Dr. Héctor Rendón, who is with us, is the Assistant Director for the Harris Institute. And then Gabriel Dominguez, who I think is in class now, but will be joining us later, and in fact is going to be presenting, is a doctoral student in our program. And so Héctor and Gabriel have been instrumental in first the organization for this when it was going to be face-to-face, and now the transition to virtual as well. And also Dr. Curtis Bauer, who is with us from the English department, kindly arranged the keynote address that Dr. Aaron Aji of the University of Iowa is going to be giving at noon. So mil gracias a todos, and also those of you who are attending now. So the idea for this morning's panel on teaching at a Hispanic Serving Institution came to me last summer when I was doing some research on Hispanic Latinx cultural studies. And I came across a couple of articles that were written by faculty at HSIs. And they were basically discussing student needs, faculty orientations, some of the advising concerns related to being an HSI and appropriately serving that population. So I thought we should be having similar discussions here at Texas Tech, and I hope that this turns out to be just the first in a series of conversations that we have on this important topic moving into the future. So let me just give you a quick overview of how we'll proceed. Each of our four speakers will dedicate about 5 minutes to discussing how we might better accommodate a more diverse student body generally, and Hispanic Latinx students specifically, from their own disciplinary and/or administrative perspective. We'll then dedicate about 10 minutes for the speakers to respond to one another, to raise questions with each other and the like, and then finally address audience questions in the last 10 to 15 minutes. And if you would pose those questions through the chat function, which you can find through your menu bar. It should be at the bottom of the screen there. I think that'll be a way for us to be able to anticipate what's coming and raise those questions when the time comes. You can also try raising your hand, but I can't promise that I will be able to get to all of you, but that's a second option as well. So I will introduce our speakers briefly now, all of them, and then they'll go in the order that I introduce them now. And if you would, each of the speakers, introduce yourselves just before you speak again, in case we have some people who come in later, so who they know you are. Elizabeth Trejos-Castillo is in Human Development and Family Studies. Héctor Rendón, as I mentioned, is with the Harris Institute for Hispanic and International Communication in the College of Media and Communication. Idoia Lola is in the Spanish program in Classical and Modern Languages and Literatures. Ashley Gonzalez is the Senior Director in the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So let's jump right into it and start with Elizabeth.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I am very pleased and very excited to be here and very thankful for the opportunity. It's hard to be the first one because I have so many things to say. I just don't know where to start. But let me just start with a couple of things that I've been thinking about, probably because I was attending this week the HACU meetings, which is the Hispanic Association of Universities and Colleges. And some of the things that we're talking about is the diversity within our same groups of, Hispanics and Latinos. And I think this is one of the main issues that we need to address directly. It is the diversity in get rid of the overgeneralizations that sometimes we use. I think that is a problem sometimes, thinking all Latinos or Hispanics fall into the same group. And then by doing that, we are not recognizing the differences and the capacities and the strengths and the challenges that every single group has. So that's one of the things that we were discussing, and it's been resonating in my mind this past week, but also resonates in some of the things that we do, when we work in the classroom, for example, or when we work directly with the students who are in recruitment. When we work with them through different activities, how do we make sure that we are actually acknowledging that we have this diversity within the same groups that we have. The other thing is recognizing the capacities and not only looking at some of the problems or deficits, but the capacities that every single group has and what they bring to the table in the conversations. Diversity is not only coming from a different country, we have African descendants in many of our countries. We have differences when it comes to languages. We have differences when it comes to historical processes, for example, political backgrounds. There's so many things that are important to be discussed. There are also different groups that I feel like sometimes when we discuss Hispanics or Latinos, we don't address the vulnerabilities that are particular to those groups. One of the things that we were discussing this week, and I'm referring to this because I think it's very fresh in my mind right now, but I think it's very, very pertinent to what we're discussing in terms of those vulnerable groups and how they may have different needs. Internationals, for example, we have a lot of international students in campus that we serve in many different capacities. We also have different groups that have other types of vulnerabilities. We have, for example, foster youth or students that were part of this child welfare system at some point in their lives, and they have there are different needs or challenges they have to experience. Is how do we accommodate them? And when we think also that unfortunately the large number of youth or adolescents or young adults that have been part of the child welfare system are composed by Latinos or Hispanics, and in many ways, including undocumented children that are still, covered by these types of services. So those were kind of the main things that I thought I wanted to offer to bring to the conversation as we discuss. I don't know if this is along the lines of what you were expecting, Kent, or there's something else that you may want me to address. I don't want to take a lot of time. I just feel like if I don't time myself, I'm going to keep going, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Sure. Oh, thank you for that. And we can circle back in the discussion among the speakers and also with everybody to touch on some more of those points. So why don't we move on to Héctor now? Thank you, Elizabeth.
Sure. Thank you all for being here. So I got to work at Texas Tech a couple of years ago, right when it was designated a Hispanic Serving Institution. And it was surprising to me that even though we had achieved that status, I didn't find any kind of, or a lot of resources that for us as faculty members to address the population. I mean, the Hispanic Serving Institution status is achieved when a higher education institution reaches 25% or more of the student population of Hispanic descent, right? Which is still very low, given that we're in Texas and that the Hispanic population in Texas is closer to 40%. And in some measures, they say closer to 50%, but we have only 25% of our students being Hispanic, right? So it was a little bit surprising to me that the university seems to be developing in this area, right? We need to adapt our courses, our curriculums, because as well, we don't have the kind of guidance from, or any kind of outline from the university, from the higher administration, I mean, for them to tell us or to create a general strategy that would allow us to address the needs of these populations. Because of course, as you know, I work for the College of Media and Communication, and as you know, there are many TV stations, radio stations, newspapers that are in Spanish. And of course, we don't have the resources yet to educate our students in the College of Media and Communication that would feel the needs of the market and to address the kind of idiosyncrasies, because we are talking about different types of Hispanic populations, of course, the different idiosyncrasies that we need to be teaching our students in relation on how to, for instance, create their own companies that would target the Hispanic population, or for them to even join Telemundo or Univision, right? One of those companies that already have some share of the market. So I think we have a long way to go at Texas Tech. It's a good start, and I think we at some point will get there. But at this point, I still see it as a major challenge that we don't have a general strategy coming from higher administration.
Okay, thank you, Héctor. Nitoria?
Yeah, it's my turn. I'm going to share my screen so I can guide you a little bit about what I've been working or thinking in the last years of since not only before ATIS, I was part of our lives. But in the discipline where I come from, which is a little bit more second language acquisition, I think that the main interest in has been how we can transform these students' learning. And specifically, if we think about CMLL, which is a department basically or primarily focusing on languages, although we do culture and other things as well. The idea of how we can start thinking about our heritage speakers as not foreign language students, who was probably how our department started. And so there are three things that I would like to talk to you a little bit about, so you have a sense of where I'm coming from. We've been following a little bit the guidelines of ACFL, which is an association for foreign languages, and also MLA, specifically the 2007 report that was trying to tell us to teach in our classes a little bit different, starting to think about multiliteracies and start thinking about critical pedagogies. And why is this important? For me, it was very important for different reasons. Once, I think that within this population, we need to promote and support their critical and social justice approaches to language instruction, specifically because these are now foreign language students. And so we have a different population and we have to start thinking about how to work with them. Also, this idea of having more critical language awareness, to realize that, first of all, We want them to feel proud of the Spanish that they speak or that they understand, even if they don't speak the language. And we also have to figure out ways of showing that language variation is not only great, but should be respected. And also this idea of creating communities of educators in which we are putting some action into what we do. So when we talk about critical pedagogies, we are trying to break through many stereotypes and truth, try to talk about issues that are important to our students, and basically what we would like for our students to be able to do is to start thinking critically and also have a voice, and more importantly, to have a sense of agency, which I think that this is something that we have not been focusing on for many, many years. And then the reason why students' literacies are important, especially for this population, if this is something that our curriculums have to have nowadays, this is what ACFL is saying, MLA is saying, we need to bring those to our classes and our curriculum per se. We have to please at least make them understand what literacies, digital literacies mean, so they have a sense of what they can do with Spanish, with their Spanish. Also facilitate ways of expressing themselves that are not traditionally academic writings, but that we can give them spaces where they can, talk a little bit more about who they are and think about the language, think about their culture, think about identities and so on. And that means maybe starting to use other genres that might be such as blogging, digital storytelling, and so on and so on. But I think that one thing that is very important as well is, and in many cases, these are first generation students, and we want them to be able to be successful once they leave our institution. And I think that it is important to close the so-called divide, digital divide, that makes sense to me, because we want them to be able to not only be efficient, but productive in what they do with the language. And so if they already have or they are not mastering certain literacies, we are making that divide even greater. And also because I think that these are the spaces in which we have to talk about language variation within Spanish, and the fact that they are using translanguaging, which is the use of two languages to create one meaning. And so this is what they do normally, and why can they do that in our institution when they're expressing themselves and talking about things that matter to them? So basically, we're not just concentrating on language users, we're concentrating language users with evolving multilingual identities. So this is my last slide, but to make my point is that when we do research, in particular, I'm not the only one doing this, but we are looking at research and looking at curricular changes so we can work with the students' population. So of course, one of the goals can be the curricular changes like I'm mentioning right now, but I'm very interested in being able to talk to students about identity awareness. We have a lot of students that they don't feel they belong to the US or belong to the country of origin of their parents, and they have this third space, and being able to talk about that and doing this through story maps, digital stories, and things that we've done in the past helps them be aware of this. And the same with social justice. We've been studying a course on social justice, and the way that we're able to talk about their culture, the way that they will talk about politics, environmental issues. I mean, it made a lot of sense to hear their voices. And also, like I said, translanguaging phenomenon, or, different Spanish variations that should be respected and I would say celebrated. And the last thing that we've been working on is if we have these frameworks or these pedagogy guidelines, and we are doing this in our classroom with the idea that making our students being successful once they leave our institution, we want to make sure that they understand what we're doing and whether they see that there's a sense to all of that. So we just finished a research project, and we've been looking into this, and so far everything is extremely positive. We still have to change certain things for the future, But I think that in my particular case, the research and the pedagogy go very close to each other, and especially because I think they need a space in which they need to understand that they are part of the society and they have so much to say, and we're giving them voice and agency. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Idoia. And I think that's actually, that last point is a really good transition segue to Ashley Gonzalez, who's with the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Ashley?
Within the Office of Institutional Diversity, but more so on the administrator side. I can tell you within the past several years, as Texas Tech was an emerging HSI, we within the Division of Diversity, working very closely with the Office of the President, came together to work on a committee that was tasked with kind of rolling out what it would be for Texas Tech to be a Hispanic serving institution. And to do this, bringing various communities in, faculty, staff, and students to also gain their perspective on some of the things that we could incorporate as we were moving towards an HSI. As you all know, the state of Texas and our growing demographics with Hispanic and Latino populations, it's inevitable that some of the institutions within the state of Texas will become an HSI, whether they set out to be one or they did not, just because of our demographic location. Texas Tech has increasingly been enrolling Latino and Hispanic students. And, you know, since the fall 2018 semester, we've been maintaining about 30% Hispanic undergraduate student enrollment. And I think that one of the most important components of being a Hispanic serving institution is not only enrolling the Latino population, but also codifying what it means to serve our Latinos so that they continue to progress within their studies as undergraduates and also graduate and then hopefully go on to, you know, graduate school or other professional career opportunities. Within the Office of Institutional Diversity, we work very closely with faculty and staff and also our undergraduate student organization so that we continue to provide services and support and resources for them so that they feel like they are in an environment in which they can thrive, so that they feel that they are getting acclimated to university life. I think one of the most important things with not only our Hispanic student population, but underrepresented students and also, as Idiola mentioned, first-generation college students, is that many of these students do not have a background in higher education, right? And so they're coming to this uncharted territory with no family background in higher education, and they're relying on faculty and staff and mentors to help guide them through the college experience. And so we have implemented many programs within the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We work very closely with the Office of Admissions. They have specifically tailored much of their recruiting efforts to focus on our Latino population, embedding Spanish-speaking counselors in some of the specific areas within the state of Texas in which we are enrolling these students at Texas Tech Universities. Currently, we have over 30 MOUs with community colleges that are already established as Hispanic serving institutions. And so we are continuously increasing our enrollment from those areas as well. From a staff perspective and a faculty perspective, we also understand that it's important for students to be able to see themselves and professors and instructors and staff members. And so we have been working tirelessly and very purposely for the last few years in trying to not only recruit more faculty of color, but also working to retain them as well. We are also, we've also piloted a program, it's called Lead Fellows, so Leaders Engaged in Advancing Diversity, in which we have worked closely with the deans, and they have recommended and selected staff members to serve as these diversity liaisons within each of the colleges that work very closely with our office. And so we're continuously staying updated with not only student programming that's happening within the colleges, but also faculty and staff hires as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Ashley. It looks like we are pretty much right on schedule. I'd like to give about 10 minutes for the speakers to address something else, something that another speaker may have said, or make connections between points. I think there are some areas of overlap and connection, but I'll give you an opportunity to do that.
Well, I think that one thing we mostly have in common is the idea that when we talk about Hispanic or Latinx populations, we're not talking about a homogeneous group. And I think this is actually something that I can only speak from my experience in CMLL, but not only that, I think that in many cases faculty is not completely aware of it, but also even the students are not aware of it, and they think that because they don't sound exactly like me or someone from Mexico, that their Spanish is not good enough. And that's just coming from the language perspective. But I think this heterogeneous group is kind of navigating these waters in all these disciplines, and I think that sometimes they need help with that.
Yeah, I think the perspective that's a good point. I think the perspective that students have a Spanish that is better than the other Spanish, I think that's one of the things that we need to work together, because in many contexts, I have had students, for instance, because of the social context in which they grew up, that their parents are from Mexico, for instance, but their last name is, I don't know, Dominguez or something like that. And when you ask them about their background, because one of the classes that I teach is about intercultural communication, and in those, of course, we need to be interested in the cultural background of the people. And when you ask them about their background, many times they, because of that social context that is very complex, they deny their Mexican roots, and they just go straight and say, my family is originally from Spain, 200 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So there is this complex situation in which in many ways, we need to work all together as an institution for us to convey the message that there is no right way to speak Spanish, for instance, right? Of course, there are many variations of Spanish, and I think that is something that in the context of Texas, as you probably know, there are counties in Texas that they teach Spanish from Spain, for instance, right? There is nothing wrong with that, but they will make it more difficult for people, because when they grow up, they realize that actually the Spanish that is spoken on the streets is actually Latin American Spanish, right? So I think we need to be addressing all these very complex situations and how we approach the concept of, for instance, Hispanics or even Latinx, right? Because in some fields, the term Hispanic means something, and then in some other areas, it means something different. And then a lot of people, they use them interchangeably, Latinx, Latino, Chicano, or Hispanic. So I think to make my point clear here, I think we need all the faculty members at Texas Tech, and if we want to achieve quality education as a Hispanic serving institution, I think we need to have a general approach on how we are going to address the different variations of Spanish that we have out there.
I would like to just add a little bit of that. I think that one of the important things about moving forward in terms of making the campus more welcoming for Latino or Hispanic or the population we're directly discussing here, we have to expand the conversation beyond just language. I think our cultures are very symbolic. There are so many symbols, it's so rich at so many levels. There's so many layers to be able to, to understand a culture. It doesn't really matter if it's just Latino culture, any culture. But I think that sometimes our conversations just stop right there with the language. We're thinking that the language is definitely it's one of the, it's a very important tool because we communicate with that. But there are so many other things that are embedded in the culture, so many symbols that I think in a way we need to embrace to be able to create a campus or environment that is more welcoming, that also creates a sense of belongingness that Ayola was talking before, which is one of the things that people struggle sometimes. Is like talking in my language doesn't make it, doesn't cut it. It's just not you using my language because there's so many variations of language. There's so many type of languages that we use, formal language or more colloquial, more informal. There are many different variations there, but having some symbols or being able to embrace the culture in so many other levels that are not just the writing or the speaking language.
Yeah, if I could jump in here real quickly, it sounds like there's several of you are advocating for a better sort of general understanding among the faculty, staff, administration about the variations in cultural identity, national origins, et cetera, among our Hispanic Latinx population. And certainly we could extend that to other populations, population groups within the United States and our international students, as I think Elizabeth mentioned as well. I mean, what might that look like? We talk a lot about, oh, well, new faculty orientation. Well, the problem is faculty are so overwhelmed usually with so many things hitting them, from their department, from their college, from the university at once. And I imagine the same is true for staff as they're coming in. I know that TLPDC, and Suzanne was on here earlier, I hope she's still here, reaches out and actually organized a panel on HSI the first year that we were working on it, which was great. I mean, is that the space to do it? Or how do we go about sort of, educating each other, educating ourselves about these important diversity issues within the population, and then extending that out to how then do we better serve the student population with that knowledge?
That's a good question.
There is something I want to just bring to the conversation that it was part of the HACU conversations as well, but it's also that I have heard from different perspectives in campus, and this idea of making the campus bilingual, or having information that is posted in Spanish, having videos of students recruiting students, having videos from faculty using our language, using the Spanish in many different ways. And there's some opposition. Some people feel like that is too much, that may be violating some of the expectations or some of the things that people are willing to commit. I believe that will be very welcoming. You can have the video in Spanish with subtitles in English. It's not that we're hiding something, it's not that you're communicating something that other people cannot understand. But I think that in other universities that have done that, it has been very successful, because it's like you are connecting with me directly without having to make an extra effort to sell me, that Texas Tech is the right place for me as a student or as a faculty. But I think in a way it's also embracing some of those symbols and that go beyond using the language in campus.
Kent, I'm circling back to the recommendation and previously working with Suzanne and her team in the TLPDC a couple of years ago. We developed the HSI informational panels. We had faculty and staff serving on those panels, and they were greatly attended. They were very informative. Students attended, faculty and staff, and we shared ideas from each of our perspectives on what we thought it meant to be an HSI, and currently what we were working on in our capacities and how we could better serve and recruit our students. And so I definitely think that now that we are an HSI and we are enrolling more Latino students and we're trying to diversify our campus as a whole, this would be a great idea to come together once again to hear from specifically students. Are we serving them? Are we meeting the needs? Do they feel like they have the support and resources that they need to continue to be successful at Texas Tech University? I think that that's a great opportunity to connect with our students once again, but also to have faculty and staff work together to share ideas on what they've been doing and what's been working and ways to improve.
But it's also, I think that we also forget the other students that do not fit into the Hispanic population. I mean, sometimes they don't understand what it means to come from a different community or different culture. And so I think that, we can do an amazing job as professors or instructors, but also we need to somehow, and I'm not sure how we can do this, because I work in a department in which that is already accepted. They're all taking languages, they're all taking cultural classes, they're all taking all sorts of things. So my community is a little bit more open-minded, I would say, to these different cultures, but there are other colleges and departments that I don't know if they have a conversation with all the students. Just to give you an example, when we did some digital stories and it took us months to work on them, we have students that were Hispanic and students that were not. And having the conversation between them while we're creating all these digital stories, one of the things that they learned was that someone that was learning the language and the culture as a foreign language understood better where the Hispanic students were coming from and the other way around. So there has to be some conversation between our students as well, so they understand each other a little bit better, so they don't start thinking about this is my this is my group and this is a different group, and this is we can do it as a professor instructors, and I think that most of us do it, but I also think that the students have to have those conversations. And I'm not sure what is the best venue. I'm just talking and I'm not sure how we could do that without getting into these battles. But I think that is something that needs to be done at all levels, not just faculty and just among the Hispanic population of students.
I think one of the other important components of being a Hispanic serving institution is also realizing that the benefits of being an HSI is not only for our Latino population, right? The benefits of receiving funding are spread across the institution to improve infrastructure, existing programs and support. And I think that at times when the focus is primarily serving the Hispanic students, the other student populations may get lost in this. And so I think it's also communicating to them how being an HSI is a benefit to their advantage as well. And so that they understand that, we're all working together to provide a well-rounded academic experience for all.
Yeah, and I just jump in here quickly. I think that's a point that we were dealing with from very early on in the process on the HSI committee that sort of evolved into the RAISE committee, right? Is that how do we communicate that out to a very diverse and growing, campus community, that this isn't just about Hispanic, Latino, students, faculty, staff, but the benefits are broader. And I think that's something we still need to work on. I'm wondering if, this group could serve as at least a generator of ideas on how we might address a couple things that have come up here. One being, how do we help the employees, the faculty, staff, other support people at Texas Tech have a sort of broader understanding of Hispanic Latinx identity and, national origins and sort of, the mix we're talking about here. And, thank you, Elizabeth, for pointing out that this is, very much, cultural and goes far beyond language. I think, in communication and CMML, we tend to focus on that quite a bit. It's super important, but there are a lot of elements. And then the second item being like, what kind of spaces could we help create for the students to be able to have those conversations? I think there's an eagerness, a willingness to do it and an eagerness to do it, but not always, they're not necessarily going to do it on their own through their student organizations. So how can we take some of those discussions that we're doing, through the TLPDC and in other venues more broadly to be, inclusive of students and, get them involved in the conversation. I know we try to do that in our classes, but then I think the students tend to see it as rather, segmented and, oh, that's just something that is relevant to that topic or that section in a course, not more broadly to their daily lives and their future professional and personal lives in an increasingly diverse society.
I think that as we continue, generating those ideas, we also have to be mindful of the staff. Sometimes we behave like an elite. Unfortunately, we think about faculty, we think about students, we think about upper administrators, and we forget about the staff. And the truth is that a lot of our staff, or a lot of the people that work cleaning and that take care of the university to look the beautiful way it looks, are Hispanic descendants. And I think we are not taking them into account, and they are extremely important. I mean, I have gained a deeper appreciation for them under the circumstances right now, because they're probably hit in many different ways by the circumstances. I mean, we are at home, we're working, we're faculty, we're receiving some of our students' benefits, and then they were hit by this. But I'm thinking beyond that is, how do we make them also feel that they belong, that they're part of this HSI University campus, that how do we embrace them in a way that will feel them welcome, and also that they are a very important part of the work that we do every day, and how we try to support them further.
Agreed, and I think a number of us have probably had similar experiences, within our own colleges, or the contacts that we have. And another thing that needs to be addressed. There are a couple of items here in the chat. Suzanne Tapp from the TLPDC writes, the TLPDC still explores understanding of student identities and has continued to have sessions, workshops, speakers like this, but this is most often done with the Institute for Inclusive Excellence. We've opened these sessions to others, haven't had much interest. Perhaps we need to revisit this. So that's another sort of initiative, within the TLPDC and more broadly with the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that could be used for that. So thanks for reminding us that, Suzanne. And y'all, please do reach out to her. Suzanne, please do feel free to reach out to us if you see ways of connecting. Curtis, actually, why don't you go ahead and read your question, because I don't want to read a poet's words as a non-poet.
You have to turn off your... Okay, is that better? No. Can you hear me? It's your Okay. Okay. Now it's because we're sitting right next to each other. We're trying to look official, but we're at the same table. Really, my question, I think it's related to Joby's, and it has to do with these perspectives on what it means to be an HSI. And I think that from my perception, the administration has a different perspective on what it means, in that the status gives us research funding, right? But what does that do for the students? And, if I'm a faculty member and I'm thinking, I don't see a relationship between what I do and, Hispanic student population research, how does that fit in with me as a computer scientist, or as a poet? I mean, I'm a translator and I can make that relationship, but I've got colleagues in the English department who are thinking, well, I teach English, I teach British literature. How am I going to do research, or how am I going to meet the needs of this population when really they need to be making changes for me, right? So I have ideas, and I feel like I'm constantly beating heads in my department, but I think that this is something that this particular group and this symposium can offer an administration to give some advice or give a little bit of experience, even thinking, well, if we've got this money, maybe we can create support systems for students and populations, where a bilingual web page, communication that goes out to parents of these students, that you can have it in Spanish or you can have it in English. Who's going to do that translating, right? I wonder if the administration has thought about those kinds of things, right? I mean, that's going a little bit beyond my question, but those are things that are going through my head as I'm listening to all of you.
And that's a real challenge, Curtis, because last semester we were working on the translation only for the College of Media and Communication. And it is a challenge. Of course, it was an initiative within the college. It wasn't mandated by higher administration or anything. But we started doing it, and then we realized that, of course, it's very complex because you have to address the needs of several populations, right? On the one hand, we have to address the needs, of course, of the students, and then you have the staff, then you have the faculty, then you have, of course, the parents of the students. So what are the elements that we are going to translate for us to make the information that we have on our websites or on our communications available for people, right? So when we were doing this last semester, it took us several meetings just to agree on what kind of information we needed to translate only for the website, for the homepage. So and that's why I was saying in the beginning that it would be good, as you were suggesting in your question, to have a clarification from the administration for them to tell us, okay, this is what it means for us HSI. And if it only means bringing money, research money, then we have it clear, and then we can work in different areas for us to address the specific populations in the different colleges. But the issue here is that, yeah, we don't have that kind of straightforward communication.
I would like to kind of add a little bit more on that, and going back to the idea that culture is just beyond language. I think that, you know, being cultural competent is being able to understand how people feel, how people think, how people internalize values, how people use symbols, for example. You know, sometimes something as basic as how people resolve conflict, how people communicate non-verbally, how people are able to use certain types of resources or feel comfortable with one versus another resource. So if I can, you know, just share with you some ideas that I have, and this is probably too much, or it's probably too broad or too wild, or I don't know how to define it, but I will envision having at least an individual in every single office that will be culturally competent, that will be trained, that will be able to understand, that without having to explain all the time and self-identify, well, I'm Latina, I have to talk to this or that person. It's just having an individual that will be a resource in every office, that will be able to work with that population and be able to facilitate some of those processes without making it an invasive way. You know, language is important, having some of the information translated is important, but I think being able to communicate to somebody, or having somebody in an office that understands more a little bit about the cultures, and not just the Hispanic culture. There might be individuals that are broadly culturally competent, that are able to be a resource to facilitate, you know, communication processes, problem solving, for example, being able to connect individuals with other resources. Like I said, you know, some groups may feel more comfortable working with certain types of resources versus others. You know, some cultures, you give them the information and they will find out, and they will feel more comfortable working individually, versus others will like to have more like a face-to-face conversation, time to sit down, have coffee, you know, discuss some of those things. Some are more open to share personal situations, problems, stories, and other people will feel more comfortable sending information online. We have, for example, the ombudsperson, not necessarily have to be something like that, but an individual that in every office, or at least at the university level, will be able to facilitate this process. I don't know if I'm making sense with this, but
Yes, thank you very much for that. We're quickly running out of time, so I'd like to just pose one question that Joby Martinez put in, and maybe we'll have time for a very brief response. What does a model HSI look like to you? I pose the question because now I work in an institution where Hispanic student population is 65%. The language, the culture, the dynamics are present, but we, faculty, staff, and administrators are engaged in discussions on, are we truly an HSI?
Well, it depends, right? Because, you know, the largest student organization at Texas Tech, it's called Unidos por un mismo idioma, and all their communications are in English, right? So, and of course, that could be a very inclusive thing to do, in the sense that, of course, there are Latinx populations that don't speak any Spanish, or so we have many, many variations, right? So I think we need to look at it from in a layered way. We have the meaning of an HSI organization or an institution for students, which I think is related to what Elizabeth was saying, that we need to address the cultural characteristics of the different populations and making sure that they are competent in that sense. And also we have the perspective from the language, right? For those who want to actually learn the language, and for them to be able to communicate effectively with in Spanish, right? And then, of course, you have the needs of the faculty and the staff, which makes it a lot more complex because it is the staff and the faculty members that they have interactions every single day with these different kinds of populations, right? So for me, to summarize what it means to be an HSI organization is related to the idea of making or creating an environment and giving the tools and the equipment and the knowledge in some cases for students, faculty, and staff, and of course for the parents in some cases, right? For them to be able to have a successful experience in college, and for them to get that advantage of being able to understand different cultures, or being able to speak different languages, and for them to be to have that competitive advantage when they go in the job market, especially, of course, the students, right?
I think there's not necessarily one single model being what an HSI is. I think it's up to us to define it, but you know, we have to start from the basic. We're researchers, for God's sakes. We can just start looking at what is what is the profile of the population that we serve? What is the profile of the faculty that we have? What is the profile of the staff, of the advisors, of every single person that is in our campus? How do we start understanding this is the population, this is how we look like? And Texas Tech looks very different from a university in Houston or from a university in, in Austin. So we need to do our homework and try and start looking inside instead of looking outside. I think we're looking too much into how other universities work and what they do. We need to look inside our university and say, okay, well, this is how we look like. This is what we need to do. This is how we can serve this population better. And also this is dynamic. The geography of our population is changing all the time. So it will be important to accommodate, as we internationalize the university, all this faculty and international students that are coming, how do we serve them better? But it will be important to start looking inside and stop looking outside and thinking how we can bring a model and implant it into Texas Tech when we can actually already have plenty of information here that we can use to start building this from the inside out.